Hello, guys. Damodog82 here with my buddy Matey. Uh,
Hello.
we're here to discuss some of the things that transpired probably over like the last year or so, maybe the last year and a half over FTD development that we were having some issues with. Matey, go ahead and start us off with your story there, please.
So before we start, I'll just add a little bit of a legal disclaimer. This is by no way objective since it's how we see this story,
Of
and
course.
that any libel should not be taken seriously by the company we are about to discuss. If you want to try and sue this video, I wouldn't recommend it, honestly.
Slander doesn't really carry a lot of weight here in America, so I'm not too worried about it.
Of course, but Europe, different standards, different stuff.
Fair enough.
So there has been quite a lot on the table with this
Mhm.
whole subject. Let's start with March of 2019, right? That was when the missile rework first started hitting the fan, so to speak.
Yeah, a lot of people weren't happy over that, especially because of the major increase in the prices.
Yeah, this is where I first got to grips with the fact that FTD developers were rather fighty. Because I was one of those guys who just saw the 10, 20-fold cost increase and just said, what?
Mm-hmm.
And started arguing over this. Honestly, missiles needed changing, but
Yeah, they
to this
did.
day,
They
I
needed a
believe it
bit of a
was
rework.
sign of things to come. A
Mm-hmm.
little bit, at least. And you can agree to that, can't you?
Yeah, it just seemed like it was the calm before the storm. Although I don't know if I could call it a calm now.
Well, at least something started happening to the game, honestly.
Yeah, it went through quite a bit of a while there where like nothing was going on, and then out of nowhere we got that missile update.
It just sort of happened, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, at this point, I had been playing FTD for 3/4 of a year. Yeah, since one of my first larger builds was in I think it was September of the previous year, should be.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I started playing the game actively. I had owned it before then, and I had played it before then.
Okay.
But,
Oh,
well,
just for reference, can you give us an idea of when you first started playing?
um, I first tried the game mid 2017 because of Robaz. I couldn't
Yeah,
figure out
Robaz
how the
is
game.
fucking hilarious. I love that guy.
Yeah, I had played like 50 hours in, defeated the first two factions of the campaign, and well, then I kind of figured out that I had to actually do work. I'm not going to say related to what, but I stopped playing for 3/4 of a year until I found a fellow YouTuber who is actually so burned out of the game now due to the constant changes that he's never coming back, I think.
You're talking about Dark Cow?
Yeah, I'm talking about Darko. That's
Uh,
when I really started digging into how to play the game and trying to be a better player.
just so you guys know, Dark Cow Nova is a mutual friend of ours. He has his own YouTube channel, does a lot of different games on his channel. Check him out. He's got some good shit there. Anyway, go ahead. Continue, matey.
So, well, let's get back to the missile changes, shall we?
Mm-hmm.
At this point, there was a lot of competitive attitudes about them.
No doubt.
Sure, they were definitely better than the old system. I think we can say that for certain. Can't we?
Well, there wasn't a whole lot of flexibility with the old system. I mean, you only had like one missile type to go with, as
Yeah,
far as size goes.
and it was very volume inefficient.
Mm-hmm.
So this cheap and volume inefficient system changed to a very expensive but volume efficient system. And I think the cost increased something like 20-fold for maybe 5 times the firepower in
Yeah, sounds
a
about
single
right.
volume. So people were, of course, complaining because you can't really get around that fact. It's a 20-fold increase versus a 5-fold increase in volume density.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that was just a sign of things to come because, well, the FTD dev team put their fingers in their ears, just said la la la, and continued onwards.
Yeah, it's kind of frustrating. But we'll get
Uh,
more into that later.
yeah, as a matter of patterns go, well, this is where it all started.
Hmm.
I think we can put it that way.
Yeah, it was kind of a scenario that just seemed to kind of snowball from there on out, didn't it?
Yeah. So we had done this. We had gone through this, and the first time I think I interacted with you on a topic we were both on the same side of was with lasers,
Mm-hmm.
since the game had been revived, honestly, because some of the some of the stuff that we were subjected to on April Fools or some such time, well, wasn't nice. It seemed like the game was dead and they were finally digging its grave. Now we know that that's
Probably
to
closer to the truth than we'd want to admit. Yeah.
yeah, for at least a part of the audience, for the very invested ones, that is.
Mm-hmm.
So due to this, we had I think it was about we were talking about lasers. So
Yes.
lasers, they were very powerful at that point. I'm not gonna lie, they were good. Were a weapon that if you made proper was probably the best weapon at the time since they had linear scaling and none of that shit that APS had to go through.
Well, unless you're underwater, then it kind of sucks. But yeah.
You could still do something with them. That was the thing with APS. Sometimes you'd get bounces. Sometimes you even wouldn't go underwater due to the speed of the shells. But
That is true.
lasers were probably the least sophisticated weapon and one of the better ones out there,
But boy, did you have to have a bunch of engine power to get them working.
which wasn't really an issue. We'll get to that later.
Oh yeah.
So, so up and come laser changes, and one of the biggest things out there was the removal of a counter to one of the active defense systems, which relied on lasers as its own source of power.
Mm-hmm.
If we can put it that way, laser munitions defenses. So my response to these changes was okay. So I quite like what you've done here, but do you
I'm
really
guessing it
like?
was the accuracy of the lenses that you're talking about, or
No, I'm talking about munition defenses.
okay, okay.
So my response was okay, but I like what you're doing here with some of the stuff, but you are actually removing a counter to this system, which will make it overpowered.
Yes, the smoke modules.
Yeah, so at this point, the balance was heavily skewed in their favor.
I think we should let people know what we're talking about. The smoke modules, basically, you could use a APS with like 200 millimeter smoke modules to like nullify a LAM system. So yeah. Anyway, go ahead, continue. I just
Yeah,
want to make sure people know what we're talking about there.
yeah, that was a hard counter to the system, and almost everybody was using that counter. You
Mm-hmm.
could get around the counter by placing smart, but there was still a hard counter to the system, so you had to have multi-layered deep defensive system, something that I enjoyed building.
Me as
As
well. Yeah.
as some of my builds prove, there was a lot you could do. There also was the fact that I was absolutely insane and willing to spend hours on it, so never mind
Mm-hmm.
that. But yeah, at this point, I had begun seeing a person we will call Draba. And
Just for reference,
th-
can you let us know who Draba is?
well, Draba is the lead, or was? I don't exactly know if he's still employed with Brilliant Skies or not. The lead balance developer in the game, trying to make everything work and be just as effective as another thing in total when everything is taken into account, which of course you can't. Aside from that little stab at him,
Mm-hmm.
he does have his way around math, and I do respect him for that. But his vision for the game was something that we didn't exactly agree with because there were deep issues. Of course, he had been playing the campaign, but he hadn't been building and counter building, which meant that for some players who like to battle their craft against one another or custom campaigns, he wasn't probably the best person to do all of the balancing. I think that's a credible way of describing him. And I have to hold back at this because if I was to be honest, this would turn into a festival of flinging insults at him. What do you think, Dama?
Let's just stick with the facts for the moment, please.
Yeah. So at this point, Dama and I were making similar points about the changes. Lasers were 9 of overpowered in their old version, but this made them weaker, which was good, but it also made the active defense way stronger, which was not good since it removed its hard counter. Just for anybody who wants to take a look at the stats now and takes this as fact, all lambs are overpowered, I'm just not going to armor my craft and only use lambs. No, things have changed since then, and I wouldn't recommend it.
Okay.
But I think just around the same time you started hanging around the same Discord server as I did, but our little interaction where we first got to know each other came a little bit later.
Yeah, there was a certain YouTuber fanboy, which, I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, let's say the fanboys actually started attacking you in quite a violent way, and I was a moderator on a certain server.
Yeah.
So I had to adjudicate.
Do you remember this is when I first started doing streaming, or before that?
I think it was before that. I think it was just one of your, okay, he doesn't know what he's talking about with this clearly. And then the fanboy came screaming at you, and I had to actually kick the fanboy because he was throwing a hissy fit and didn't want to actually talk sensibly.
Well, let's be honest. The guy with the YouTuber in question, he's not the best builder out there. But
yeah,
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, at that time I had watched a couple of his videos, and honestly, if you can call his builds average, if high in firepower now, I think that's credible.
Yeah, just like ugly bricks with guns strapped to them. That's pretty much all they were. But anyway, going on.
2 wedges strapped together with a couple guns on top.
Pretty much, yeah. Anyway,
and now we started adding bridges, so congratulations for progress. Sorry, I couldn't resist that.
Oh, no, you're fine.
Well, so at this point, I started seeing some of the vile stuff that Abba had to do because he was completely ignoring the feedback. There have been at least 5 people on the forums, and just so you know, that thread had a total of 16 users, of which 3 were developers talking about the changes. At least that was the active people. There were more who joined in the conversation, but only left a short comment on something.
So basically, it was just like a very small group of people voicing their concerns, and the rest of them were what? Were they just like backing up the devs, or what was going on with this?
They were mostly neutral. Some of them were even expressing the same worries we had, but in much less detail. So it was a change that everybody thought, okay, offensively, good. Defensively, hell no. At least that's how I see it.
Okay.
I was also arguing for compound protection, that different counters should affect different ways the lasers work.
Mm-hmm.
But that got just shut down immediately.
That seems like a fairly common thing that I've seen, where people like try to offer counterpoints to things, and they just get shut down by either one of the more blindly devoted FTD fans or a developer, one of the two. Would I be correct in assuming that?
At this point, the player base, at least the ones on the forums, weren't toxic, so there was that. But on the other hand, it was probably the developer's laziness, since both the systems had been implemented at that point, and a little bit of worry that it may create a strong counter that prevented this from happening.
Yeah.
At least that's from my point of view. Of course, I can't see into their heads. But so let's move on. And let's move on to one of the big subjects. So at this point, we had been through 2 changes which left many unsatisfied and glaring problems with balance of the game. And
Actually,
let's
I'm sorry to cut you off there. It just, I think it was about this time I posted something on the forums about feeling that the game was getting dumbed down, and this is about the same time where I first had my first contact with Draba, and he happened to
Mhm.
mention that my opinion didn't matter because that I didn't have enough views. I'll be sure to put a screenshot up so you guys can see that later. But anyway, May, go ahead and continue, please.
So I'll take a little bit of a detour at this point, something I hadn't mentioned when we were actually discussing this first, which is Patreon for Brilliant Skies when it launched.
Oh God, I remember this and was like, okay, this sounds like a terrible idea.
Yeah, I thought, hey, good, they have something to support them. Then I learned, what the fuck, the people who pay insane amounts of money get the direct access to the developers and get their suggestions put in. This is not good. And at this point, I was sometimes in the FTD's official Discord discussing stuff. I'm kind of getting attacked by fanboys even then. And it wasn't anything quite as vile as now, but there was still the beginning of what we would later come to hate and regret letting happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just pull up the screenshots because I actually moved the screenshots onto the computer so I can remind myself why exactly I need to put a middle finger to the devs because that's how bad it got.
Oh yeah, I remember these were some pretty dark times for a lot of people. I'm assuming this is just before the APS rework or nerf, as we like to call it.
I think this is 3 months back from before then.
Okay.
So I had gone out and I had made a post that it's unfortunate that such a decision as with the dev chat happened, and I said that it was due to the fact that people could pay to influence the game more.
Which actually did end up happening because that's how we ended up with cluster missiles. But go on.
Cluster missiles, cluster clamps, plasma, and everything that was tried and never implemented.
Mm-hmm.
And I said there would be a divide between the patrons and the general community, which would be stupidly dangerous and dangerously stupid.
Mm-hmm.
A fair assessment, Dama, in your opinion, or not?
Honestly, I kind of saw it coming a mile away, seeing that certain people who are willing to put more money into the game would have the developer's ear a bit more than the rest of us. It felt very, very unfair to me, and that's probably when I first started deciding that maybe this is something that should be discussed and at least debated a bit. But I don't even think that happened.
Yeah, at this point, I can definitely say that I was pretty darn pissed off because the price was exorbitant, like $100 a month.
Oh God, that's
If it was
insane.
if it was $10 a month or 15, I get it. You get access to the dev chat, and you can put your suggestions in.
Well,
You don't
way you
have
make
to.
it sound like it's almost seems like a shameless money grab to me. I'm just calling a turd here.
I was arguing about it closing off feedback, and well, this is where we meet somebody who had just begun working at Brilliant Skies as their financial manager. I won't
You're
mention
talking
who
about
this is.
Sean,
Yeah,
aka Beastman.
come on, I didn't want to mention the nickname. Now we'll get blamed if he gets toxic stuff to him.
Well, I mean, if you look on Discord, he has his name right there with his um, handle and everything. So yeah.
Yeah. So let's stick to identifying him. I don't like identifying people like this, but well, let's move
Okay.
on.
Well, I'll try to avoid that then from here on out.
So this guy had previously been a really good admin on one of the FTD tournament servers, the Arena.
Mm-hmm.
And I had actually had some interactions with him since Darko Nova had tried doing a tournament, which failed spectacularly due to due to all of the changes.
Mm-hmm.
There were some submissions, one of which was mine, but all in all, there was not really much you could actually say good about the tournament, because people didn't like the premise of it, not that the server was dead or anything.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, the server is still kicking and is doing relatively well as one of the officially supported servers. But I'll just scroll through some of them. And this was at some, I think it was 9:30 British time
Mm-hmm.
when I was discussing this with Beastman. And of course, it was everything that I had expected. And he first did a lot of good explaining the position, but then he said something that he honestly shouldn't have,
And what was that?
which was that if they're willing to pay more, of course they get special treatment.
Hmm.
I'm paraphrasing at this point. I can send you the screenshots later, but I think you already have them.
I very well may. I remember you shared a lot of them with me. I'd have to dig through them. I put them in a folder marked dirt, if that tells you anything.
Yeah. I mean, there is enough of it to form a folder of its own. So, well, think what you will.
Mm-hmm.
And I said that the vocal detractors of the game wouldn't be able to engage with the devs as effectively. So even at this point, I was already starting to become the dissident. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a fair way of describing this. And my counter idea of Q&A sections for the devs to answer each week was swiftly rejected.
You don't say.
Yeah, it was an alternative, which I don't think they saw that happening with how much money they were asking. Of course, this was probably one of the first times that we had engaged in such a manner,
Mm-hmm.
but there was already that little sneaking suspicion that it was about more money than anything else. I can't believe I don't like that I'm having to say this, but it's how I see it.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing more about it. So let's go. And well, Ring Shields editions. This was when I really got
Yeah,
pissed off
those
with
things seem so
devs.
garbage, but I'll let you tell the story on that.